being faster, but still being on trend, still being answering to consumer need, and still being mindful of what, today everybody talks about, which is sustainability, right? There is a big question mark on like, how can you be sustainable when you are that fast in your delivery?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's podcast here on the Product and Packaging Powerhouse. And y'all know who I am. I'm Megan Young Gamble, Global Project Manager, Packaging Specialist, and an everyday lover of lip gloss. So if you always want to add to my collection, feel free to do so. And I am so excited to have today's industry powerhouse, an executive marketing director and also an entrepreneur. Her name is Sandra Pitroipa. She holds a master's degree in cosmetic science and marketing. Brilliant girl, right? She has worked in the beauty industry her whole career, focusing on raw materials and also ingredients. She also has specialty experience with brand building and international brand development. Sandra has worked with countless experts from her native roots in Paris to London and now in New York. She is also an entrepreneur and founder of My Curl ID, an online store for high quality curly hair products. And girl, I sure needed you when I had my loose fro. And so Sandra is passionate about all things with representing Black women in the beauty industry. And guys, I'm so excited to have today's powerhouse guest, Sandra. So welcome to the show.
Hi, Megan. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here and have the opportunity to kind of discuss with you and share our knowledge and passion about the industry.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's always amazing when I meet other industry experts that are in the industry because we're all in different sectors, but yet there's so many similarities and commonalities we have across various industries and how they all intertwine. So I cannot wait to have this conversation with you. To get us started with you, share a little bit about your background and how you evolved into the beauty industry.
So as you say, I was born and raised in Paris, and very early on, I was always passionate about science. So chemistry and biology were my topic of choices at school. And I also wanted to make my own makeup. There was nothing more to it than, wanting to make my own makeup at some point in my life. So I studied chemistry, and then I took a specialization on cosmetic science, where I did work in a lab. I did make my own makeup. I didn't think it was that much fun for me to stay like working in the lab in the background. And then I directed my career more in marketing. I was always also passionate about, discovering the world. I really wanted to have an international career. At the time, my English wasn't very good at school. So after I finished university, I worked in Paris for a year, and then I moved myself to London to learn to speak English. And this is where I really took on my career, developed my career in the UK, and had the opportunity to work in New York also. I have been in New York now for 5-6 years, still working in beauty, still enjoying it very much so.
It's amazing how regardless of where we're geographically located, we have a lot of alignment. So we both have undergrad in chemistry, first and foremost. We both worked in the lab. We both was like, this not for us. But you recognized and knew and learned early on in your educational career that cosmetic science was a thing. I didn't realize that until after I graduated college, in transparency. So that, just goes to show like where you're geographically located, you can be studying the same major, but the different emphasis can really be different depending upon where it's highlighted.
I think it's really a function of where the birth of the cosmetic industry is, right? Beauty products have always been used across multiple cultures in different shape and form, but the industry itself, if you think about who are the biggest player in the world of fragrance, of makeup, of skincare, a lot of these companies are in Europe and more specifically in France, right? And so France, for a very long time, actually, France was one of the only countries that deliver master degree area of cosmetics. it's difficult still to find master degree. You can find, undergraduate degrees in many countries, but to study and specialize in cosmetic science at, at that level, you can find that everywhere. So I think that's why, growing up in France and starting my educational journey there gave me access to, as you say, this opportunity to, in beauty that didn't exist in many countries up until 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. In France or in European countries and stuff, that is more prevalent with the beauty industry. So I didn't realize that France was one of the countries that offered a master's program in cosmetic science. And here in the US, we have countless places that now offer, the degrees and stuff. But the one school I know is University of Cincinnati. They have a really big cosmetic science program. And I know a few people like Cynthia Johnson, who's another Black-owned chemist, that went there. I know Vanessa, who went to Rutgers and studied cosmetic science. So we're starting to see a lot more people become familiar with it because beauty is starting to expand much larger and it's global now.
And I've always found it fascinating when you think about the number of new brands that are born in America versus, versus, for instance, in France. You're like, and when I meet founders and I'm like, damn, you studied all of that by yourself? I mean, there are degrees, to help you understand how the ingredients work together, or you should mix them together. And the number of people I have met that have started pretty much learning from scratch how to formulate products and do it effectively, it's quite impressive, of course.
Yeah. And you're even starting to see on YouTube how more people and more organizations are coming to YouTube and really showcasing their knowledge and expertise and how you mix the different ingredients and the different emulsifiers and preservatives that are required, because guys, all preservatives are not bad. So you're starting to see a lot more availability of the information in real time at your fingertips.
This is what I find is I'm quite passionate of having had the opportunity to work in the US is that ability that individuals, especially people coming from, minority backgrounds, right? Regardless of their ethnic background, but the ability to just learn and make things happen for themselves. You know what I mean? And, we know that education is also very expensive in this country. So forget about the fact that you may or may not know that degree exists, right? That access to education is not available for everybody, but the passion that people have that allows them to continue to pursue their passion from, starting in their kitchen, making products and learning by trial and error versus me, who sat in sat in a classroom and learning it from somebody else. I just think it's quite fascinating to see that happening.
It really is. And, I wish I would have done things a little bit different when I was in college, but I'm right where I'm supposed to be, and I tell people, even with my chemistry background, they're like, you should have studied cosmetic science. I'm like, I didn't know that was a thing. I could go get a certification, but my love is packaging and to house all the beautiful formulations and ingredients that are created within the beauty world. So that's where my love is. And that's where I use my chemistry experience. So very fascinating. So since you now have been in the beauty industry for what, almost 20 years now? Is that right?
So in total, I guess, coming up to
in
that.
total. And we're international, coming from Paris, London, and now in the States, here in the New York, kind of share with me a little bit about what you've seen change or evolve within the beauty industry.
So I think, the speed at which brands are being launched and products are being put in the market. This is something that is quite fascinating. I think that seeing, as I said, the biggest company, them feeling challenged by the newcomers in the market, it is quite interesting. I sit in meetings with, with our senior leadership, and the fact that we're sitting around analyzing small brands that are just starting to kind of be out in the market out there, something that, 20 years ago, nobody would have, been concerned by NYX. Nobody would have been concerned by these smaller brands that are there on YouTube or on Instagram. But these days, the impact that these brands have on the strategies that the larger companies are taking is quite fascinating. So there is that is quite interesting to see, much more people have a bigger voice within the industry. The message is no longer just contrived to the who has the most money to push messaging forward through campaign. Of course, it's still important. Of course, the larger company are still, topping the chart in terms of sales, but other people have a voice within the industry. And this is what I think has changed a lot. The speed to market is incredible. The ability of somebody to be able to bring a product to life within a matter of like 3, 4, 6 months, it's is quite interesting to see, especially because it's still a challenge. Larger organization.
Yeah.
This is where we are. This is where we like, oh, how are we able
How are
to
we going to
compete with
compete?
these brands, right? So this is interesting, and what I think is that balance between being faster but still being on trend, still being answering to consumer need, and still being mindful of what today everybody talks about, which is sustainability, right? There is a big question mark on like, how can you be sustainable when you are that fast in your delivery? Surely somewhere down the line you cut corners that are not supposed to be cut, right? So this is an interesting change in the conversation, and of course the biggest piece is the diversity aspect. How diversity and representation has evolved over the last 2 decades within the beauty industry, and again how the big players being challenged by things that they have done in the past that they could have done better. They could have led that conversation, but for some reason it took the smaller brand, the passionate people, the people who have been, studying by themselves, learning about the industry. It took all of them to come together for the bigger player to realize that, okay, there is something that we need to address in that area also in terms of diversity and representation.
Oh, girl. Like, guys, did y'all just hear this from Sandra? Like, she just dropped like so many gems, and we're going to hit on some of the key points that she mentioned because we're going to go into all of them. First one, she talked about the speed of products in the market. We hear about speed to market all the time, especially if you work in corporate where you cannot launch a product in 3 to 4 months like the smaller brands. It's taking us 12 plus months, of the full development plus, and then considering where it's going to be launching at. It's US only, US, Canada, international. It's a whole thing. But anyway, speed to market is like the number one thing that you're hearing about, right? And I want to hit on some of the other key points too. Second thing, how corporations are analyzing small brands that are able to launch within the 3 to 6 month period. Number 3, sustainability. That's the biggest word we're hearing universally across the board, from small brands all the way to corporate. And then diversity and representation. Going back to me talking about, I wish I would have known about cosmetic chemistry or the beauty industry growing up here in the States and going to college. That is part of like why I'm doing the podcast, to bring more diversity and representation of other Black people and minority groups in the industry, in packaging, how we can start to feel the need for it. So we're going to hit on all 4 of these points that you mentioned, because you just sped through all of that quickly. Like we in a Lamborghini, you just flew right through all of them. But I'm like, hold on, let's take a pause and admire this Lamborghini that's cruising by for us. So going to point number 1, speed to market. So from your experience as a marketing executive, what things are you assessing to help with the speed of market for products to get into the marketplace and having the compelling campaigns that really resonate with the consumer?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, like speed to market in larger organization is a challenge, because there is so many the processes that have been established for very good reason to maintain quality, steps of quality controls that are part of what larger organizations are able to do compared to smaller one. We have to be transparent when it comes to that, being able to source the right ingredients at the right place with the right partner. So it's an aspect that, even today I'm still challenged on being able to address. How can we, improve speed to market? One thing that I often notice in the day-to-day is that piece about consumer insight. The time that is taken to study what consumer want or think they want does impact the product development very well. And this is something that the smaller organization seem to be able to capitalize on much faster. So the way they collect feedback from their consumers through social media, the way they choose to act upon it is significantly faster than what we do within larger organizations. We go through multiple rounds of testing. A lot of the testing plots that we do provide insights that will allow us to, as you said, deliver like compelling messaging and campaign and everything else. But sometimes you have to ask yourself the question, what would have happened if you hadn't spent 6 months testing? Eventually there are people out there that trust their guts a little bit more. When you work in larger organizations, sometimes I feel like, not just for me, but discussing with people outside my organization is I feel like, yeah, we don't trust our guts enough. And one of the reasons maybe is not so much about trusting what we think is right, it's also the consequences, right? Once we launch a product, we place an order for a large quantity of material, we're still going to have to sell it, right? So that's why all the testing and that consumer understanding takes a little bit longer. And sometimes I wish we could just be like, hey, here is an interesting consumer insight. Let's act on it. We don't need to ask 20 million people in the world, do they believe in that insight? So it's trying to find that balance because if you launch a product that isn't successful, as it happens a lot, and sometimes a lot of companies do a lot of testing, and the product still does not resonate in the market. And that's another conversation. But the question is like, how do you recover from that quickly enough that you can launch the next product? And that's something, again, that some of the smaller organizations do very well. They act upon consumer insight fast, and they react very fast also on how the product is perceived in the market.
That's so true. And just within corporations, we have, to your point, processes. Then we have the different departments we have to go through, especially regulatory and legal, to make sure we
Tell me
can,
about that.
I call them the redliners because they always like, nope, 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 nope. And I'm sure as a marketer executive, you're like, we need to say this. This is what's going to really appeal to our consumers. But you're telling us that we have to change it to this. Like, it's always, a tug of, I don't want to call it tug of war, but it is a tug of war, with trying to get the tone of voice and the messaging out there for the products, to resonate with the consumer.
Yeah,
So,
no, yeah, definitely. Legal and regulations are such also an important part, as you say, of the product development. And it is frustrating when you're a marketeer, specifically, as you say, is like, well, the competitor does it, right? So, but does that make it right? Not necessarily. Does that mean that we're too harsh on ourselves? Also, it's not necessary. So it's really on a case-by-case basis of what seems right and what seems right to communicate to the consumer. Because the last thing that you want to do, of course, is to communicate something that is not accurate or 100%, 100% on message just for the sake of having something interesting to say. And again, it's all a balancing act and exercise of what is perceived as over the top versus what is perceived as an okay marketing messages, which are always being specifically coming in the US. Moving from London to the US, I've worked for international brand, and although I know that regulation changed from one place to the other in the world, it was fascinating to see from a campaign perspective what you could do in the US versus what you could do in the UK.
Yeah, we're a little bit more lenient here. You think we're a little bit more lenient here in the US?
Yes, and I think it's fun. I mean, something as simple as retouching. When I was working on mascaras, right? How much you can retouch the lashes on a mascara advertisement. The difference between the US and Europe was fascinating at the time. I know that has changed, but so basic thing as that, what you could say on TV here versus here. So the US regulation has always been a little bit more lenient in terms of what is perceived okay for the consumer. But I think that I'm seeing over the years that it's starting to change. They're starting to adopt a model that is a little bit more in line to what we see in Europe. In some ways, they are like a little bit behind versus what is happening in European market. But, it's that balance versus what the consumer wants to hear and also what is perceived an okay messaging.
That's a whole lesson right there because, as I'm working with more emerging brands, they're like, oh, well, we want to go launch and start offering products to ship into Europe. Well, there's different requirements, different it's a whole different ball game. Like, let's focus just on the US first and tap and really
Mhm.
excel in this market and get your bearings first because you're not, I tell people, you may not be ready for international because it's
Yeah.
a whole different set of regulation, guidelines, import, messaging, tone of voice, certain ingredients. Now we have
It's a
mocha in
yeah.
place.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? I'm like, it's always good to shoot big for the stars, but let's do it one at, gradually get up to that point. But let's dominate US first because
Mhm.
we know
Yeah.
we know what we can do here versus trying to go and expand into Europe. So,
Mhm.
to that point, with the different regulations and things being a little bit more lenient here,
Yeah.
we're slowly, I'm saying that like very slow. We're slowly adopting, but
Slowly.
yeah, slowly. But I think it will be good once we do I think it will be good once we do find our balance and start having cohesive messaging,
Yeah.
regardless of if it's US or international.
Mhm.
So good ways to go still.
Yes.
Next point I want to talk about quickly is some of the data and the insights. So as you mentioned earlier in the episode, you mentioned how some of the corporations are now starting to analyze the smaller brands and how they're able to launch within a very accelerated time frame, 3 to 6 months, and how they're leveraging data insights. What are things that corporations can do on top of what you mentioned to start really capturing data and help drive consumer insights as well for the marketing?
So yeah, so I mean the things that has supported the smaller brand, like the fastest, is that they have access to first-hand consumer data. So larger organizations have relied on retailers to be able to sell their product, right?
Mhm, mhm,
Retailers are not just sending all their data to the brands, they just don't do that. So the challenge is how do we capture first-hand consumer data from the larger corporation? So basically, if you don't have a DTC website, you're very stuck in understanding of what is driving the purchase of your particular product, right? And that's the biggest thing that the larger corporation needs to do, is to have a platform where they can capture that data rather than relying on what the retailers may communicate to them, or we use external companies to kind of drive data
mhm,
gathering for us. Right? We were able to have that at the tip of our hand on daily basis. It will be much faster. And I think that some of the brands that we have seen that have been very successful, like Glossier, for instance, the first-hand consumer data that she was able to gather within her blog is what has given her the edge to be able to be so on point with what the consumer wanted at the time. And as I said, it's your ability to have that data available to decipher what makes sense to keep and what not, and
mhm.
to take risk and chances on some of the things. You're never going to find 10,000 consumers saying exactly the same thing.
No.
You know what I mean? That's not going to happen. So sometimes it's just how this insight makes sense. And then when you start digging deeper and start asking questions based on one insight that only few customers may have mentioned, that's when you're able to kind of actually have propositions that consumer feels more related to. And I think that, unfortunately, sometimes this is what is missing from the larger organization, is to have that first-hand consumer data and be able to converse much faster with the consumer and then act upon what they want at the time where you find out the insight. Because finding the insight in January of 2023 and launching the products in July of 2025, whatever the
Yeah.
consumer said in January 2023 may well have changed 200, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
180 degrees by the time it launched 18 months later. So it's that, that, as we said, that balance between capturing the insight, acting upon it, and being able to make it available to the consumer fast,
Mhm.
because there is too much movement in the market, and
Yeah.
very change a lot. It doesn't
Yeah.
seem that it does, but it does change gradually, specifically in makeup, which are categories that are very trend focused and move very fast. And
Yeah.
what is also interesting in the world of insight is that having that understanding of there is a difference between attitudes and behaviors. Attitudes is what people say they're going to do when you ask them the question. Behaviors is what they actually do when they get to the shop. And that filling that gap is very difficult, because once you're in a setting of a study, you're sitting somewhere, someone asks you a question about your beauty habits, and it's not to say that people lie, it's to say that people don't necessarily take into account everything else once they're answering this particular question. And there is that idea that, you like to think that this is what you're going to do. Like, when I do my consumer research and I ask people, does it matter to you that the brand is Black owned? They say yes. That's an attitude. The behavior is like when they get to the shop, do they actually buy your Black owned brand? That's a behavior, and it's not to say that. So that disconnect is often sometimes that also we need to take into account when we want to think about consumer insight and how to fill that gap of the reality of what happened at the time you make a decision to buy versus what you think you're going to do.
I've never heard it put that way. And you just said that so eloquently, but yet very concise and to the point of really differentiating between the attitude and the behavior of your consumers as part of that firsthand approach and gaining insight for that data. So I think that's gold. And guys, do y'all hear this? Like, if you're not connected with Sandra, her links are down in the show notes for you all because she is an executive marketer. She's international and she knows what she's talking about. But I think a lot of companies really needs to implement the attitude versus behavior approach within all industries. It's not just applicable to beauty, but since we're talking about beauty, it is beauty, but it really is applicable in all industries, from a marketing perspective, because nobody's put it that way. And I appreciate you for just being really frank, to be honest, and very concise with this is what you really need to focus
the thing,
on.
as I said, I don't think people, I think that, we all have an idea of what we would like to happen, what will be the ideal scenario. And I think that in beauty specifically, the way you close that gap between attitude and behavior is that if you deliver what the consumer said they wanted as fast as possible in an environment that is not, where there is no distraction when they actually make that purchase decision. Because this is what happens when you ask somebody, what do you want in January 2023? And then you launch it in July 2025. Yeah.
I moved on to something else. Yeah.
By that time you had 3 different jobs, 5 babies, you may have lost your job, God forbid. You know what I mean? There's so many things that happen in life. That means that when you're going to actually come down to the buying decision, well, yeah, it's going to be a bit different to what you would have liked to do,
And I think that's one thing too, that even just working alongside of like mid-scale and corporations for products, like I think that's like the really big thing. They're like, we got to hit this launch within this time frame because we're going to miss the trend. So we have to do this in the rapidest, lightning speed ahead to get to the speed to market, to really make sure we're having that firsthand approach with the consumer data and insight to still be trending and still be relevant, to keep the momentum. And it's like, we don't have 24 months to be going through and getting validation of testing, even though we have to. Sometimes we're like, well, what can we do in real time? What can we parallel thing? What efforts can we parallel? How do we resonate? Or what claims can we start making immediately? So we're looking at all of that to get to that speed to market and have the products be right on trend with consumers. Because to your point, you create something 2 years, gaining insights from 2 years ago, trying to launch a product, you missed the whole trend. 2 years ago, my hair was a pro.
On certain product category, definitely. On others, it will, it will stay on, and some of the pain points of the consumer are not really going away within 2 years. So sets in certain categories and products, you can do that, but others, you need to just be a little bit faster.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And so speaking of, we talked about speed to market. Now let's talk about sustainability. It's the biggest word there is within all realms, regardless of scale of businesses. So as a marketing executive, what things are you looking at as part of the sustainability story to create like compelling campaigns? And also sustainable packaging, like why is that important for marketing purposes?
Yeah, so what I think, so within my remit at the moment, it isn't my area of expertise. I collaborate with colleagues to be able to, to utilize their learning for me to integrate that in my day-to-day. But really, we have teams, within the organization whose day-to-day job is really to kind of focus on how can we as an organization make our business more sustainable. And as you say, it touches so many different aspects of, within one business that, it's even hard to tell, where is the biggest impact. And because, and talking for myself personally, outside of where I work, outside of everything else in my own belief, I'm still struggling with that idea of sustainability in the long term. As I said, I'm not my level of expertise in it is not as deep as it could be, but that's why I think of myself as a lambda customer. And I'm like, okay, if I don't understand it that well, how can we make that message more compelling to the consumer? Because it's one thing to be able to say that you're sustainable, but the understanding of what it means is very, very different. There is so many different ways for sustainability to be impacted within the organization. Something as simple as air freight. We buy goods from, everybody buys goods from different parts of the world. How do you get your goods in your market? If you travel by boat, it's more sustainable than traveling by air. An organization that may just decide to just cut all our air freights, completely is a step towards sustainability. Is that something that the consumer relate to? Maybe not. It's always that balance of, what does the consumer understand sustainability to be? So they might be sitting around thinking like, well, your packaging or this doesn't seem that sustainable. Yes, but other companies do have sustainable packaging, but they still air freight them to the US. So where do you find the balance of where sustainability lands? And this is why it is an important conversation, specifically, as I mentioned, we talked about how can we be fast and still sustainable at the same time. I think it's one of the biggest challenges that everybody has at the moment. And from a consumer perspective, as I said, I put myself in the shoes of a consumer. I don't always understand what sustainability means, whereas when certain organization tells me that they're sustainable, I'm like, what does that mean? End of the line products, you launch a product, a limited edition, it hasn't sold through. What do you do with what is left? How does that impact your sustainability messaging? There is so many different aspects of sustainability that it's hard for me to kind of connect with certain industries, like what does that mean for you and what actually do you act upon? Because packaging is one thing, but it's I may be wrong, but I don't think it's the biggest driver of sustainability impact globally across everything that is being done.
Yeah, and so number one, I want to break this sustainability down because it's the big word right now. First, I appreciate you just being candid and like, that's not my area of expertise. But, as a marketer, you're still looking at what is the full story behind sustainability, but what does that mean? How is it going to really resonate with the consumer? And that's the main question I ask brands because they're like, I want sustainable packaging. Well, what does that mean for you? What's the impact for your consumer or your ideal client? Like what are they going to gain for the benefits? So I asked the exact same question. I talk about that on my interview with Sustainable Packaging Podcast, respectfully for the beauty industry. Like, what does sustainability mean for you? That's like the number one question before you even go down the rabbit hole of any sustainability initiatives, any type of sustainable operations, sustainable packaging, sustainable ingredients, sustainable inks. Like it starts to go down a whole big path. And now we have guidelines that are coming into place, like packaging extended producer responsibility, EPR. We're looking at sustainable practices with MOCRA, so it's like, what does that mean? But also the other point you mentioned was like sustainable packaging. It's becoming a really big conversation, like from a global impact. When you have brands like Sephora with clean and planet positive brands or clean at Sephora, you have other initiatives going on internally within these organizations. You're starting to have, global sustainable packaging coalitions to catch up with what international, like European countries, Australia, other countries are doing with packaging and how to put it back in the circular economy. It's a big conversation. We're still in its infancy stage in transparency, but I think we're starting to slowly, as I mentioned, adopt some best practices and how do we have the right infrastructure in place to have sustainability looked at as a whole.
Yes. And I agree, as you say, it's still at the infancy stage, and it's still a learning curve for everybody, involved in the system. I mean, for me, for me, I'm like, okay, are we going back to what recyclable was when we started talking about, let's recycle everything. And then, we created like a whole separate industry was created for
Yep.
recyclable products. And
Yep.
as, 5, 10, 15 years goes by, and like, well, actually, we can't really recycle everything. But for me as a consumer at the time, I was studying. When all of that was happening, I was just starting my career and trying to see like what it means when you're actually within the industry, when you're actually working. That there are so many people who are very passionate about all of these different aspects and actually are trying to make a difference in the way we approach business and practices, right? So yes, we create separate organization to manage the things that the messaging that we want to deliver to the consumer, but it's like everything else. My perception of recyclable items at the time was that we want people to feel okay to consume. It's okay to continue to consume as much because fine, we can recycle, right? When we all know that, the amount of consumption is the biggest problem to start with, right? But if you give the consumer an idea that, okay, we don't want you to stop consuming, don't worry, we're going to do something about what happened after you have consumed, then it makes people feel okay. I feel like within sustainability, there is more a part of trying to even address the consumerism that we have all, that we are all participating into, myself included, working in the beauty industry. I feel like sometimes I'm starting to see, having deeper conversation with people that we're actually trying to address some aspect of consumerism, but it's still, as you say, at the beginning, and that's why I'm like, let's wait and see, because are we creating a whole new industry and, all new things about sustainability, and in 15, 20 years, somebody is going to say, well, actually, we don't really do that, but,
Exactly. Well, after
we have
further
to wait and
analysis, we
see.
don't have the right infrastructure. Like,
We
that's
don't.
what I'm
No,
scared to
not
hear.
yet. But as I said, I can tell, I see passionate people who have all the good intention, better knowledge of what cannot be done, better collaborations between, between different partners and different aspects. So let's see where we're going to get to. And, as much as, recyclability has evolved and changed over the years, we're still in a better place than where we were 20, 15 years ago. So mistakes have been made along the way, and it's bound to happen when you do something new. So I'm sure it will happen when it comes to sustainability. Yeah. But on the long term, hopefully we will be in a better position than where we are today.
Yeah, I definitely hope so too. So look, God willing, or whatever you believe in.
Yeah.
Hopefully we see in the next 15, 30 years, within our lifetime, we hope to be able to see it and see the fruits of our labor, so to speak. So as we're starting to shift gears to our other topic to really highlight about like your experience within entrepreneurship and really how you really cultivated your brand, My Curl ID, share a little bit about what My Curl ID is and what made you go down the path of entrepreneurship as an executive.
Yes, and I mean, we talked about at the beginning, and how marketing and beauty is evolving over time, and I did mention that question of like diversity and representation, and for me, it's really that's one of my main driver when I think about what's happening within the haircare industry, targeted at Black, brown people, curly hair, textured hair, however you want to call it, right? I like many people like many of my peers, working within the beauty industry over the years, I have seen the evolution of what diversity meant for brands. I'm yet to see the full evolution of what representation means, because it's two very separate pieces and very separate conversation. Interestingly enough, I was discussing like a campaign idea recently, and I was like, can we please not have a white, a Black, a Chinese, a redhead person on the campaign just because we think it's the right thing to do? If it's not part of the story, let's not do that, because it's getting to a point where addressing diversity and representation is becoming very, very challenging for brands to do it authentically. And I feel like sometimes they're struggling to understand what authentic actually means. And actually not that hard. It's really not
Yeah.
that. And if you
You would
want
think
to,
you would think
yeah,
it's not that hard. Yeah.
yeah, and like if you really want to address diversity because you think it's part of your marketing message, you also need to address representation. And it's two big separate topic. And I think that we are yet to see the impact of representation within the beauty industry. And again, it's really not that hard. And, there's many things that different people can do to participate in doing that. I've decided to focus on hair care because of all the category of beauty. Hair care for textured hair, yeah, it's mostly bots and by Black people. So I'm like, okay, we should be able to see, we should have a bigger piece of that industry and that category. There are enough education, knowledge, interests and passion within that particular product categories that we should be able to build something where we feel like representation is no longer a question. Considering that the product is only used by a certain type of people, representation shouldn't be an issue there. But yet we are still seeing some challenges here. So I've decided, I thought about making a product, and I think like for me, I'm like, I don't think there is a lack of products. We talked about all of these, entrepreneurs that have educated themselves in like a deep understanding of hair category, products, ingredients. Like there are so many people who have done the work already. I'm like, I don't think product is what is missing. I think like what I thought was the biggest challenge for me as a consumer was the retail environment. And I felt like the way hair is marketed and sold for Black individual is still very fragmented. We're starting to see some changes within the industry, but we're not there yet. I still have to go through 6, 7, 8 different retail environments just to be able to buy my hair care products for the year. Right. So, yes, I use braids, I use extension. I also use shampoo. I also go to the salon. I also do X, Y, and Z, right? Black people, diversity of hair is something that we know is part of the,
It's a
part of the
beautiful
culture,
thing.
right? It's a beautiful thing.
Beautiful
It's part
thing.
of the culture. And yes, we want to celebrate it, but for some reason, again, we see the diversity, but we don't see the representation. And when it comes to the representation on shelf, when it comes to representation, within the industry, like in marketing team, in product development teams, in all of that, we are still yet to see the biggest impact. And I think it's important for us to be driving it. We need ally, like, as we know, I'm not intending to build something that is just for Black people with Black people. That's not my intention. But my intention is to develop something where representation is key, and we make sure that we celebrate and put forward the individuals who actually can deliver. It's one thing when, 20 years ago, somebody was like, well, but, there's not a lot of, Black marketeers and Black X, Y, and Z. I'm like, okay, fine. We pass that. So it's enough. There is enough of every single function. There is enough of every single, area of expertise. There is enough of everything that really, if you wanted representation to be your number one goal, you could make it happen. And specifically when it comes to hair care, is still something that we have to work on. And the retail environment is too fragmented, not elevated enough. I generally think that, there is so much more that can be done. And this is my passion and my intention is to give a platform to all the individuals that wants to contribute positively and make a positive impact on celebrating Black individuals' hair, but also representation within that.
I love that. Oh my gosh, guys. If you wanted a retail marketplace to see and tap into Black and minority-owned hair brands and to be educated, microid.com, because that is a whole lesson not only with Black diversity or minority diversity, but also representation. Because as Sandra mentioned, there are two different things, two different paths, two different efforts. They are not all the same, but with that, go and support her online store, because when I went through there looking at the different products, looking at the different messaging on there, like I've been all through your website. I'm like, even though I no longer have my curly big fro, I have locks, but I still
Yeah, we
utilize
still,
those same
exactly.
products for my locks. And depending upon the season, now at the time of this interview, it's getting cold. So my hair care regimen for wintertime is
It
different
is,
than
it is
the
different.
summertime.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting you mentioned that, because, I'm still at the beginning of what my vision, and my vision is to cater for every single hairstyle, every single hair type, regardless of what your hair season is. So at the
Yeah.
moment, I have focused on having products who have a direct benefit to the scalp, because that's where where your healthy hair journey starts, right? But as you say, as an individual who has many hair seasons during the year, if I walk into, I'm going to say, a Walgreens or even a Sephora, right? Yeah, I'm going to walk
Yeah.
there and I'm going to say, hey, this is what my hair looks like, and what should I be doing, like in the winter months, if I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I'll challenge you to find a single person that can answer accurately to that question. They have put all of that category within, like, curly, coily, textured hair, first assuming that means the same thing for everybody, that there is no differentiation within that. I'm like, yes, people sometimes struggle to understand that even if you wear weave, you still have natural hair.
Yes.
Sometimes that's just a distinction. Sometimes people are like, oh yeah, but she doesn't have natural hair, she wear a wig. I'm like, she still has natural hair
She still has her hair.
under that, right? So so trying to kind of, but it requires a different routine than if you wear your, like, your afro, right? That's a basic, but that differentiation is yet to be understood by the retail environment that we shop from. And this is where, as I said, my vision is beyond the representation, is also to be able to provide education to individuals. So I'm looking at the moment to partner with different, stylist experts. I have the product expertise and all of that, but I'm not a stylist, and I'm partnering with stylist expert to really understand, as you said, if you wear locks, what is the best regimen for you and the type of products? Why do we have to assume? And it's not, we don't have to assume, we know it's not correct, but the people currently leading the retail environment are not willing to go to the next step. They're like, okay, we're going to store the products, we're going to make them available behind glass most of the time, because God forbid we want to steal them. And then, but there is where is the next step after that? And as I like to say, until Sephora starts stocking wigs and weaves, you're still going to have a fragmented distribution. And I don't think they're going to do that anytime soon. I may be wrong, but let's see.
Yeah, honey, look, because I was about to say something about, like, I'm gonna say that for a later day. But to your point, we do have a gap within retail that's, really has the education, proper education around textured hair. I did hear about a recent collective that was started, the Texture Education Collective, where you're having different corporations that are partnered together to really educate cosmetology students about the importance and how to style textured hair. I don't know if there's an opportunity there to do some research, collaboration, or what
Oh
have
yeah,
you.
definitely. I'll take a look. Thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely. And there's a couple of stylists and trichologists that come to mind that I would love to introduce you to, as well as part
Yeah.
of your cohort of
Yeah.
stylists and trichologists as part of testing. Because to that point, scalp health is now becoming a big trend, more widespread. But specifically, like within Black culture, from the time I was a little bitty girl, my mom would brush my hairs. Grandmama would actually style my hair, oil my scalp, grease it, massage my scalp and everything. That was part of like the scalp health regimen with us
Yeah.
growing up. To now we're using different elixirs, different, different essential oils and how it may do a tingling effect. I love me peppermint and rosemary
Yeah.
and tea tree blend on my scalp. So with that, scalp health is important to then help with promotion of hair growth, encourage hair growth, and ultimately feel good about yourself. So I think I really commend you for creating Micro ID to really be a differentiator from a retail marketplace standpoint, and having the representation and going beyond the representation too, with the products and the offering and the education that's centered around Micro ID. So I love that. So as you're an entrepreneur and you're a marketing executive, how are you balancing these worlds
It's
on
hard.
both ends?
I think I got to the point where I'm in it for the long run, right? I know it's not a like a tomorrow solve. I think that it takes a village to do everything, and I'm focused on the long-term benefits that I can provide within the community, and I'm focusing on associating with the right people to be able to do that. It's very hard because, of course, time is the biggest constraint. Being able to spend enough time on something that you're so passionate about is the largest challenge for me. The times that I have available, and I've noticed over the last year also, is that you have to make sacrifices. What I do at the weekend, what I do after work, before work, all of that. There's so much time within a day, right? So you have to make your choices on what you're going to do. But beyond allocating the time, what I have been the most challenged with the last 12 months is the mental capacity. So it's one thing to have your Saturday and Sunday open for you to work on your side project. Is another thing for your brain to be in a in a state at which you can even think and work effectively. And that's still something that I'm learning on daily basis. I'm still learning to understand for me as when are my most effective time during the week, morning, evening, lunchtime, or during the weekend. So that's something that changes according to the time of the year. Also, the challenge, of course, beyond time is skill set, right? We have, I don't know, I, like most people, I doubt myself a lot. I'm like, oh, I need to find an expert in X, Y, and Z before I can do that. And sometimes it's not necessary. I know I've wasted a lot of time thinking that there's certain things that I couldn't do myself because I didn't think that I was good enough to do it. And then realizing that actually you don't need external people all the time, right? It's important to recognize where you are not the best person to do that, and then seek the expertise elsewhere. And that, but you also have to rebalance the things that actually you can do certain things yourself, because finding people to partner with, even if you pay them, it's a lot of time. The quality of the work that you're going to be receiving, you need to let go, of course, of controlling every single thing, and that's fine. I can do that, but you start working with somebody for 2 or 3 months, and then they move on with their lives, they have something else to do, and then you're left with like a gap in your in your team of freelancers, which is what I use. And the cost, it's not free. I hate using people's time for free, so I will never, it's not really something that I want to do. I think that everybody that wants to do some work should be paid for it. Do I negotiate with my vendors, freelancers? Of course, based on my budget, but it's based on my budget rather than based on what they think I think they can deliver. I think that it gets to a point when we talk about representation, again, representation, diversity, you have multiple diverse model in your campaign. Are they all paid the same? This is for me is a difference between diversity and representation. Diversity is having different people. Representation is to make sure that they are valued to the same level as everybody else. So when I work with freelancer, I'm like, I appreciate your skill set. I can't afford you right now. I'm going to save that for when I have more money. In the meantime, I have to select people who maybe have less experience, and it's more work for me, to manage and brief, but this is what I have to do for the time being. So it is a challenge, I'm not going to lie. I think that my next step is to identify, like, actually bringing in business partners to make sure I can, deliver my vision faster than I'm currently doing. But as I said, it's a step-by-step process, and you need to be committed and know why you're doing certain things, and that's what's going to give you the reason to continue on all these days where I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, nobody buys from my website. And that happens, don't get me wrong, it's very hard. Attitude versus behavior. It's very hard to get people to do certain things, even if they believe in what you're doing. And that's fine. I have enough validation in the knowledge of the industry, the people that I work with, and I just need to continue to push.
Yeah. And you know what? You being honest and be like, it's a challenge, and here's where I'm experiencing the challenges at, is real. It's raw. And it's the ugly truth that people really don't tell you with balancing your job, building a business, the different stages you go through. You deal with a lot of imposter syndrome. You need to work on the weekends, but mentally you are not even there because you're like, I'm just decompressing from the week I had or from the day I had. And how do I even reposition my mindset to do this. And they always say, well, you just got to keep moving, keep hustling, keep grinding. And that's true and all. But yet, ultimately, your health, self-care
I
has
know.
to be on point. That's a work in progress for me too.
Yeah.
Because even me building my business, building out contractors, hiring team members, and being the head of all departments like you are, you know, it doesn't get any easier once you become full time.
Yeah.
It's just you just learn to juggle the different
Mm-hmm.
pieces when they come. But my biggest piece of advice to you is make sure you rest. So if you're not
Yes.
mentally up for it,
Mm-hmm.
don't force it because it's not going to produce as much
Yeah.
fruitfulness as
It's
you
true.
intend, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So that's the biggest thing I've learned with me operating my business is when it's time to rest, we got
You
to
have to do
rest.
it. Yeah.
Because if we don't intentionally do so, our body is going to make us shut down and be
Yeah.
forced to rest.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to give you that piece of feedback. I am
Thank you.
rooting for you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
encouraging you. However, I can support you with my Curl ID. I'm going to introduce you to some stylists and trichologists for partnerships.
Yes.
Whatever I can do to help support you in this effort, in this endeavor, I'll be happy to because it is more, it's diversity, but it's also representation and going beyond that too. So I want to make sure I'm a support person for you as you're in this new stage.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And you're right, sometimes you just need to rest and not feel guilty, once like when you start doing something, you're already so far ahead compared
Mm-hmm.
to a lot of people who just have the idea. And I think
Mm-hmm.
like, what I deal with when I'm like trying to rest is being able to rest, as you say, is like
Yeah.
getting to the mental capacity where you don't feel guilty about resting, where you don't feel like, oh
And
my
you
God, I
do.
could be doing something meanwhile.
Yeah.
And that's the part also that is a struggle for me. I understand the time required for my body, my mind to rest, but to be able to do it effectively without feeling guilty is a challenge because,
Yeah.
we are bombarded by like, I cut off my time that I spend on social media because I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, look at her, him.
Yep.
They started only a year ago and this is what they're doing. And we compare
Mm-hmm.
ourselves to a lot of people, not knowing what their story is and who is doing
Yeah.
what for them. And I'm like, how do they have the time? How do they have that, this and that and the other? And yeah,
Exactly.
and you just have to
Yeah.
appreciate your own journey, that you're doing the best you can with
Mm-hmm.
the best intention. And one day you will be able to get to where you need to be. But as you
Yeah.
know, the journey, I know it sounds very cliche, but the amount
It
of
is.
people that I have met over the last 2 years since I started, that alone for me is reward. Because
Yeah.
as I said, there is so much coming from a different country. I moved here, I had to build a network, right? So, but seeing like, as I said, there is enough. There is enough knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
there is enough passion, there is enough money even within the community to make
Yeah.
certain things happen. So
Yeah.
just able to see that and discuss with people the passion that I see, it's part of, for me, it's part of the experience of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So one step at a time. And
That's it.
yeah,
That's it. It's a marathon. It's a long distance marathon. It is
yeah.
not a short sprint. And even the people we see on social media, they're like, I did this in 3 months. I go back to product development with this, because when you're starting to prepare for a launch, right? You
Mm-hmm.
don't start highlighting stuff when you're in R&D phase. You don't start, you
Yeah.
really start the marketing efforts like for pre-sales, like, okay, we kind of know what the production schedule is starting to look like. We're having packaging be delivered to the CMs. We're now starting to do pre-sales and pre-launches, things of that sort, PR, etc. So that's when the efforts are going out, right? And it's only like within that certain short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So same thing I think of with social media. People who highlight, oh, I did this in 3 months. Not saying some people don't, but I think some of it is overemphasized and glamorized in
Yeah, I
some
mean, this is what social
regards.
media is, right? Social media was
Yeah.
always it has that part, but we like it or not, we still
Yeah.
mentally react to
Mentally,
it,
yeah.
and I'm always, and we talk about the challenge of entrepreneurship, beyond the time and everything that we talk is the financial aspect. And I have a, whether I like it or not, I have to maintain a job. I have to pay, like,
And nothing wrong with
I
that.
have financial responsibilities that I have to take care
Yeah.
of. And when I see other people like, oh no, I'm full time in my thing, and I'm like, I'm sitting there thinking, well, who pays your bills? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have the answer, I don't
Girl,
have that answer, but sometimes I'm just sitting there thinking, damn, yeah,
girl, let me
I
let
don't
me tell
know.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you. Because I'm full time in my business,
Mm-hmm.
and I tell people, do not sleep on a 9 to 5. I will go back and get me a 9 to 5 quickly to get the benefits, to get the 401k
Yes,
contributions
all of that.
with the matching, to have paid vacation time off, paid sick time off. Because in this entrepreneurship world, if you don't
Yeah,
work, you don't have no money. And then some
yeah,
days you looking
yeah,
at your bank account and the money's not producing, but you're like, I didn't spend 80 hours 1 week.
yeah,
I ain't made no money.
yeah.
So I tell people, I don't knock not one single person for working a 9 to 5 and building your business. Whatever is gonna help pay
That, yeah,
maintain your
because
lifestyle.
for me, I feel like I grew up in a family where, we didn't have a lot of money, right? So my
Mhm.
very early on, my mind is set on like I need to be able to provide financially. I think I will lose sleep over having to think
Exactly.
about, where my next paycheck is going to be. So that's a sacrifice I make. I'm like, I don't think I will have the mental capacity to be
Yeah.
stressed about money because I've seen that happening
Yeah.
growing up, and I don't think I could do that. So
Yeah.
that's my balance. That's my
Absolutely.
balance for now, and then hopefully I'll get to a place where I can transition. But it will happen when
And
it happens.
don't rush it. Look, don't
Yeah.
rush it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I'll say this too to wrap up, like with full-time entrepreneurship, they on social media still.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll make it be glamorized, like, oh my gosh, I run my own schedule. Oh my gosh, my time is my own. Oh my gosh, I made six figures in X amount of time. But yeah, we only know that short little window that
Mm-hmm.
they disclose on there because they're not telling you about the sleepless nights. They're not telling you about how they're gonna make payroll or even how to pay themselves. They're not
Yeah.
talking about, okay, I didn't make no money for this whole week. And now I gotta pay freelancers, contractors. I'm trying
Yeah.
to find
Yeah.
clients. I'm trying to do marketing, advertising. I'm trying to hire an agency, but yet I don't have the capital to really hire
Yeah.
them. But I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure
Yeah.
out how I can barter. We're not telling you that. I'm
Yeah.
just being honest. So I tell people it's to each its own. So if full-time entrepreneurship, part-time entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
working in corporate, whatever floats your boat to maintain your livelihood and your household and your family, do whatever
It's
works
what
for
is, yeah,
you.
you're right. You're right. It's whatever works for you. And this is why, this, as you say, like what people disclose on their social media or else is one thing. And I listen to a lot of podcasts of entrepreneur, and that's why
Yeah.
this is a more interesting, as you say, conversation, because that's when you can really see the vulnerability of individuals.
Mhm.
Not recently, but 6 months ago, I listened to can't recall her name, the woman who started It Cosmetic. And
Mhm.
yes, she's very successful now. And yes, she may not have shared that story at the time when she started It Cosmetic, but it doesn't change the fact that she spent 2 years in a very
Yeah.
difficult financial situation, trying
Mhm.
to push what she believed in. And as
Mhm.
she explained, like the number of times that people just said no to her. Nobody cares
Mhm.
about It Cosmetic, it's not going to work, there's no propositions there, and blah blah blah.
Mhm.
That's the reality. There was no
Yeah.
glamour in her first 2 years of setting up her business, but
Yeah.
she continued. She was very close to give up until somebody said, "Okay, well, why don't we try?" You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for
Sometimes all
me,
you
like,
need is that one yes. That's all you need, just one
no,
yes.
well, all you need is one yes, and I think that what is important is preparation. You
Mhm.
need to be prepared for the days the opportunity is going to come.
Yeah.
If you're not ready, the opportunity might come to you, that to be able to take your idea to the next step, and you're going to be like, oh, now you wish you had done X, Y, and Z. So
Yeah.
it's not about the amount of time it takes, it's how prepared you are when the opportunity is gonna come your way.
Mhm. And honey, yours is coming. It's already here. This is gonna be enhanced and elevated from
I know,
here.
right? No, thank
So,
you. This was
Sandra,
a great conversation.
absolutely, likewise. And as we start to wrap up, I like to do one last thing, last minute, which is our power round. So we like to ask our powerhouse guests about some of their favorites, put them on their toes as well, to just give them a 60-second power round asking about top highlights. So, Miss Sandra, you ready?
Yes.
All right. Let me put 60 seconds on the clock and we'll go ahead and get started here. All right. So, what is one piece of advice you would give to someone that is interested to work in the beauty industry?
I will tell them to explore all of the roles that are available and not be focused on just what they see as a consumer, but realize that there is so much more that goes into that industry that are very exciting too.
I love that. Explore all the roles. Very good. Okay, so fill in the blank. Marketing and packaging go together like
Oh, wow. Marketing and packaging go together like uh, cousins, I will say. They're not
cousins.
sisters, but I think they're more like cousins.
Okay. And why you say cousins?
Because there is an element of like, familiarity and you need to be close, but you also need to be able to give some distance. If you only focus on one or the other, it's not going to work. So you need to be able to appreciate what packaging does separate to marketing, but still be part of the same family.
Mm, right on time. Okay. And I'm gonna ask you one last question, even though we're beyond the 60 seconds, is share with the audience how they can help support your diversity and Black representation in the beauty industry.
Well, at the moment, I have a questionnaire that I'm going to share on LinkedIn and I will share it with you. A
Okay.
lot of time people feel like, they have to participate financially to make a difference in what they want to do. And it's not the case. At the moment, I'm doing, consumer insight, first-hand data, as we discussed earlier. So, if you have 5 minutes to complete my questionnaire, that will be a very good step in supporting what I am doing.
Perfect. And guys, everything with Sandra's information. So to learn more about My Curl ID, to connect with her on LinkedIn, and to take the 5-minute questionnaire, all of those details will be down in the show notes for you all. So all you have to do is just scroll down to them and click the buttons, click the links, and you'll be navigated to the respective places. So Miss Sandra, thank you so much for being our featured powerhouse for today.
Thank
And
you.
I look forward to continue to support your efforts with My Curl ID. And guys, make sure you do follow, like, and subscribe to our channels. And also give us a 5-star rating because we love some love. And also let us know how we can do better with these podcasts as well. So until next time, I'll see you at the Product and Packaging episode.